Welcome to part 3 and the last part of this tutorial series where we're creating this low poly island in Blender. So in this part we're going to be finishing up the entire scene, and we're also going to be doing the lighting and materials and getting the final rendered image. And as I did mention in the other parts, if you'd like to help support the channel, then checking out my Gumroad store and Patreon page are really great ways to help support the channel. And on my Gumroad store and Patreon page you get the tutorial files, so the tutorial files for this tutorial here as well as my other tutorials, and you also get access to the 3D models and assets that I create, and also procedural materials and other Blender project files. You can also check out the YouTube memberships, so if you click on that join button right down there next to the subscribe button, if you join my memberships you'll be helping to support the channel each month, and you'll get some cool perks here on YouTube. Alright, so before we create the materials I want to get some nice lighting so that we can actually see the materials better. So let's do the lighting. So we are in Blender Eevee at the beginning of this tutorial series. Right over here on the render properties we changed this to Blender Eevee. So I'm going to hold down the Z button and then I'm going to move my mouse up into the rendered view and let go. So we are now in the rendered view, or you can also click right here to go to the rendered view. Now there are some settings that I want to turn on to make Eevee look a little bit better. So over here on the render properties I want to turn on the ambient occlusion, and I also want to turn on the screen space reflections, and you could also turn on motion blur if you are doing an animation or you just want some blurring of something. I'm not going to be doing any animation, so I will just leave the motion blur off. Now I also want to make the colors nice and contrasty and make them kind of vibrant and saturated. So I'm going to scroll right down here and I'm going to open up the color management tab right here. Now on the view transform I'm going to set this to the filmic, so just make sure it's set to filmic, and then to make the colors look nicer I'm going to change the look here to very high contrast. So it looks a little bit darker right now, but when we add the materials and the lighting and everything, it's just going to pop out the colors and make things look a bit more saturated and contrasty. So now I want to add a sky in the background to just get some nice lighting and get a nice environment. So I'm going to click right over here on the world properties, and then I'm going to go right over here to the world, and if you don't have a world you can just click on the new button to add a new world. So right now we just have a default gray world and it looks kind of boring. You can change the color, but instead I want to add in a sky texture. So Blender actually has a built-in sky texture. So right here if you click on color, click on the yellow dot there, you can go right over here and I want to add the sky texture. So it's right here under texture, sky texture. And when you add that in, it's going to be on this setting right here. I don't want this one, so I'm going to click on this one and I'm going to set it instead to the Hosek Wilkie, if I'm pronouncing it right. So now you can see that we have a really nice sky there in the background. Now it is a bit dark, so I want to make it stronger. So on this ground albedo, I want to turn this all the way up to 1, and that'll make it a bit brighter. And then I also want to turn this strength value up to like a 2. So now that is much brighter and that looks a lot better. So we now have a nice sky there in the background. And then I do want to get some nice bright lighting to make it look like it is daylight. So I'm going to press Shift A. Shift A is going to go to the add menu, and then I'm going to go right down here to light, and I want to add a sunlight because a sunlight just adds light all over the place and it looks really good for a daylight scene. And when you add the sunlight it's going to add it right down here, so I just need to press the G key, G to grab the light, and I'm going to bring it up here, and I'll press the 0 on the numpad to go into the camera view, and then I can press R, and R is going to rotate the sun, and you can see now we have some shadows there. And I'm also going to just rotate it over a little bit this way and rotate it down a little bit, so now we have some really nice shadows there. All right, that's looking pretty cool. Now I do want to click right over here in the object data properties to go to the camera settings, and then right here on the light I want to turn the strength up. So I'm going to turn the strength up to like a 7, so it is much more strong. You can see that's really looking nice now, so we have a nice bright light. And then also on the color here, to make it look like sunlight, I'm just going to make it a little bit yellow. That's looking pretty good. Okay, so let's press Ctrl S again to save. So we now have some nice lighting, so let's now do the materials. So I'm first going to do the material for the island, so I'm just going to click on the island right here, and then I'm going to click over on the material properties. So over here in the material properties we can add materials to the different objects. So I want to add a new material to this object, so make sure you have it selected, and then I'm going to click on new here, and I'm just going to rename this material to sand, or you could rename it to island, whatever you want to call it. All right, now right down here, there are a lot of things here, but we actually won't be using most of these settings. Most of these settings, we can just leave at the default. Now the settings that I do want to change are the base color. So let's click on this color right here, and I can change this color, and that is going to make the color of the sand. So I'm going to make it kind of a yellowish orangey color. And then I also want to go right here, down here to the roughness. And if you change the roughness, you can see it's going to be more reflective, or if you turn the roughness up, it's going to be more rough. So I do want to turn the roughness up maybe to like a 0.6 or a 0.7, just so that it is a bit more rough. Let's press Control S again to save. So now let's make the material for the cloud. So I'm going to click on the cloud right here. Let's click on the new button, and I can just rename this material to cloud. So rename it to cloud right there. You can just rename the material. And then right down here on the base color, I just want to click on the base color, and I want to make it fully white, so it's very bright. And also if you want to, you could just make it slightly blue. So now let's select the tree trunk, and we're going to make that material. So I'm going to click on the new button here, and we can just call this like tree or tree trunk or whatever you want to call it. Let's go to the base color right here. And for this, I just want to make it kind of like a light brown, not super bright, but something like that. Maybe just a little bit darker. Something like that is pretty good. And I'll just leave everything else set at the default, so I'll just change the color there. All right, now let's make the coconut. So I'm going to click on the coconut. Let's click on the new button here to add a new material. I can click on the name here, and I can rename this to coconut. And then let's take the base color right here, and this is again going to be a pretty easy material. I'm just going to make it kind of like an orangey color. And then after I make it an orange color, I'll just make it darker, and that will make it brown. So just make it a bit darker. And also, if you zoom in here, I think just turning up the roughness would be a bit better. So I'll turn that roughness up a little bit, and then just kind of adjust that color. All right, now I can also just click on this coconut right here, and then I can click on the drop down, and I can change it to the coconut material. So instead of selecting the object and creating a whole new material, I can just use the same material on both of the objects. And I'm also going to click on this coconut object right here, and I will click on the drop down, and then I'm going to click on coconut. All right, that's good. So let's click on the branch now. I'm going to click on new, and I can just call this branch or leaves. All right, and then on the base color here, I'm just going to make this kind of like a green color, and I will make it a bit darker and maybe just a little bit towards the yellow, a little bit darker, and maybe a little bit saturated, a little bit more saturated as well. All right, that's really good. Now we could just click on each object and then click right here, and then click on the branch material. But what we could also do to speed up the process is just hold down the shift key and select all the branches. So just hold down the shift key and just make sure all of those branches are selected. And then at the very end, hold down the shift key and select the branch which has the material on it. So I'm now going to press Control L, and Control L is going to bring up the linking options. And I want to click on link materials. And if I click on link materials, now all of the objects are going to have the same material as the last object that was selected. All right, so that's a quick way to set the materials for all those objects. Let's press Control S again to save, and that's looking really good. So let's click on the boat now, and we're going to create that material. So I'm going to click on new, and I can just rename this material to boat. All right, so boat. And then let's click right here on the base color. And again, this is pretty easy. I'm just going to make it like a brown color. So I'll make it orange, and then I will turn it down. So if you make an orangey color and then turn it down, that's going to make a nice brown color. Something like that. That's pretty good. And then I can just click on this ore here, and then click on the drop down, and we can add the boat material, and click on this ore here, and click on the drop down and add the boat material. All right, that's good. Let's press Control S again to save. So let's click on the chest now, zoom in here, and I'm going to click on new, and I can just call this chest, and I want to rename it to chest wood, because we are going to be having two materials for the chest. One is going to be wood and the other is going to be metal. So for the chest wood, again, I'm going to make a brown color. So let's just make this a brown color like that. So make it kind of an orange, and then just turn down the brightness. Maybe a little bit less saturated, something like that. All right, so I'm now going to press the period key on the numpad. That's going to zoom me over to the object, and I just want to have those other pieces there to be metal. So I'm going to press the tab key. Tab is going to go into edit mode, and I'll just press A to make sure I deselect everything. So I now just want to select those pieces that I want to be the metal. So I'm going to hover my mouse over the objects and press L, and L is going to select all of the linked vertices. So just hover your your mouse over these objects and press L, and now we have all of those objects selected. So I'm now going to go right over here to the material slots, and I want to create a second material within this object's material slots. So I'm going to click on this plus here, and this is going to add a new material slot. So now we have the chest wood, and then we also have another material right here. So I'm now going to click on new to add that material, and then on the material name, I can rename it to chest metal. So chest metal. All right, so now that we have that chest metal, we have chest wood and chest metal, so I can actually select both of them. So I'm going to select the chest metal and then make sure those objects are still selected. I now want to assign the chest metal to those faces, so I can click on the assign button, and that's going to tell the chest metal to just be on those parts of the object. And then I can tab to go back to object mode. All right, so now what I can do is take this base color and I can make it a little bit darker because it's pretty bright. And then to make this look like metal, I can turn this metallic value up right here. So I'm going to click and drag and make this metallic value all the way to 1. And now you can see it looks like metal. And then if you want to play around with the roughness of the metal, so how shiny it is, you can play around with the roughness right here. So I'll make it a little bit more shiny. And then it is a pretty white metal to pretty bright metal. So back up here on the base color, I'm just going to make this a darker color. Something like that. So that's pretty cool, and you can see it's very reflective because it is metal. All right, let's press Control S again to save, and now let's do the ocean. So I'm going to click on the ocean right here, and then I'm going to click on the new button, and let's rename this material right here to ocean. So rename it to ocean. All right, now right here on the base color, I'm going to make it a blue color. So let's make it a very deep blue. So a very strong deep blue. And then I want to make it very reflective because it's water. So I want to take this roughness value and I'm going to turn it all the way to 0. You can see that now it is reflecting what's kind of up top here. And then I want to make it even more reflective. So I'm going to take this specular value. Right now it's set to 0.5, and I'm going to turn it all the way to 1. So it is very reflective. All right, now that's looking okay, but the water is very flat, and usually the water would have kind of some ripples. So what I'm going to be doing is adding a procedural noise texture to make it look like the water is kind of lumpy, or the waves are rippling just a little bit. So what I'm going to do is click right up here on the workspaces, and I'm going to click over to the shading tab. So this is going to take us to a new workspace. So we're going to have the shading tab, and then we're also going to have the 3D space. So I'm going to press the 0 on the numpad to go into the camera view, and then I'm going to hold down the Z button and move up into the rendered view and let go. So then you can click right over here on the material properties. You can see here's the ocean material. So we are going to be using Blender's shader nodes to be setting up the material, because right here, this is basically a simplified view of the shader nodes. You can see there's the settings here, and those settings are also right over here. But over here, it's a bit harder to add procedural nodes. So we're going to be using the node system to be adding some procedural nodes. So I want to add a noise texture to make it look like the water is rippling. So right here in the nodes, in the shader editor, I'm going to press Shift A, and Shift A is going to bring up the add menu. Now I want to click right here on search, and I can just search for something. So I'm going to type in noise, and I'm going to add the noise texture. So let's just drop the noise texture right down here, and then I can just plug the factor of this noise texture up to the normal. So what this is going to do is it's going to make it look like it's bumpy by putting it into the normal. Now the problem with this is that we need to convert this to normal data, because this right here is just black and white data, but this needs to be a normal data. So we need to convert this data into normal data. So to do that, I'm going to press Shift A. Let's go to the search here, and I'm going to search for a bump node. So a bump node is going to convert any color data or black and white data into normal data. So it'll actually look bumpy. So I want to drop this bump node right in here. So I'm just going to click and drag and drop it right in here. And when we dropped it in between the wires, it connected it up. Now this noise texture, I want to take this wire and I'm going to plug it instead up to the height value, and that'll convert it to normal data. All right, it's loaded up and you can't really see anything, but that is because I need to turn the scale up on the noise texture. So I'm going to turn that scale way up, and you can see now we're getting some ripples. Now I've turned this up to a really big value, but you can see those ripples are still pretty big. So what I'm going to do is add another node. So I'm going to press Shift A, and I'm going to go to the search here, and I'm going to add a texture coordinate node. So you can type in texture and then C, and you can see right here there is a texture coordinate node. So I want to drop the texture coordinate right here. And then I want to take the object and I want to put the object into the vector. So now that we've done that, it's going to make the scale a bit more even. It's going to kind of fix that where we've scaled it up really, really big. And so now you can see that those ripples are actually really small. So I'm going to bring the scale value way down. I'm going to bring it much smaller. So just drag the scale value down. And if you want to use the same value that I'm using, I'm going to use a scale of about 7. So that is looking pretty good. So now you can see it looks quite a bit more like water. Now it is really strong. It is pretty bumpy. So on the strength right here, I'm going to turn this strength value way down on the bump, and that is going to make it less bumpy. So I'm going to turn it way down. I'm actually going to click on the strength and I'm going to turn it way down to like a 0.06. So a 0.06, maybe even like a 0.05. So now there's just some little ripples there, and that's looking really nice. All right, now I also want to add a little bit more detail and make it look a little bit more like water. So right here on this noise texture, I can turn this detail level all the way up to the max, which is 15. And now you can see there's much more detail there in the water. But then on the roughness here, I want to turn the roughness down. So I'm going to turn this roughness value just to like a 0.3, and that'll make it look a bit more like water. So that is pretty cool. So now you can see if you look at it, especially on the side there, it's kind of all reflective, and that is looking really nice. So we have some nice water there. So that's just a very basic kind of stylized water material. Let's press Ctrl S again to save the project. All right, so I am done with the shader nodes for now. So I'm going to click right back over here on the layout workspace. So we'll go back to the layout workspace, and now it is full screen in the 3D space. So now I just want to do a few more things. I want to duplicate some of these trees and kind of move them around. And then I also want to like duplicate some of the coconuts and like have them so they've fallen down on the island. So what I'm going to do is press B for the box select, and I'm just going to drag a box around all of the pieces here of the tree. And you can see it also selected the light right there. So I can press B again, but this time I'm going to middle click. So click with my mouse wheel and then drag and then let go to deselect the light there. So I'm now just going to press Shift D to duplicate and then bring that tree over there. Let's press R to rotate and Z and rotate it on the Z axis, and maybe have it kind of rotating down a little bit. And it should really look good from the camera's perspective. So just kind of rotate it around however you want. And you can also change how the tree looks just by selecting some of these objects here and pressing R to rotate. And you can just kind of rotate it and just kind of rotate these around till they're how you like. So I'm going to rotate that around. You could also move the coconuts if you want to be able to see more of them. Just kind of rotate that around. So I'm going to double tap the R key to rotate that. You could also duplicate some of these leaves or duplicate some of the branches. So I'm going to press Shift D to duplicate and then R to rotate and just kind of rotate another leaf over there or another branch. All right, that's pretty good. You can also just select the trunk right here, and you can kind of change how the trunk is shaped. So I'm going to press the tab key, and that's going to go into edit mode. And then I want to hold down the Z button and go over to the wireframe, and I'll press A to deselect everything. So I can now just press the B key for the box select, and I'm going to drag a box around these vertices, and I can press G to grab and R to rotate and just kind of rotate that over. Hold down the Z button and go back into the solid view, just like that. Maybe rotate that over a little bit, so it's kind of sticking more into the island. I want to go back up into the rendered view, so I'm going to hold down the Z button and go back up into the rendered view. That's looking pretty cool. And then I also want to add one more. I want to add one more tree kind of over here. So I'm going to press B for the box select. Just box select this entire tree here. And then again, I don't want to select the light, so I'm going to press the B key. And then I'm going to middle click and drag to deselect the light. All right, so I'll now press Shift D to duplicate, bring that there, and then press R to rotate. We're going to rotate that on the Z axis and just kind of rotate that over there. All right, that's pretty good. Oh, and you can see that I accidentally selected one of the branches from this tree here. So I'm just going to select that and I'll press X, and then we can just delete that object. All right, that's pretty good. Let's just move some of the coconuts around to make them look a little bit different. And you can just select some of these branches and press R to rotate and just rotate them if you want to make it look a little bit different. And just kind of rotate it into a spot that looks good. All right, and I'll navigate up here. And I'm also going to press Shift D to duplicate and then R to rotate, and we're going to rotate another one right there. Maybe rotate that down a little bit. All right, that's pretty good. And just kind of rotate any of these if you need to. Maybe rotate that down a little bit, move it over so it's not going through that tree there. That's pretty good. All right, there we go. That's looking pretty cool. Now I also want to select the coconut right here, and I actually want to change the coconut material a little bit because I want to make them a little bit darker. So right over here on the material properties, if you just select one of the coconuts, I'm just going to make the base color a little bit bit darker, so something like that. And also, if you want to, you could turn the roughness down just a little so they're a little bit more reflective. All right, now I also want to duplicate some of the coconuts and make them look like they fell down here on the island. So I'm going to select this coconut and I'm going to press Shift D, and Shift D is the shortcut key to duplicate objects. And let's just bring this down here, just press G to grab and stick it right in there. And then I want to duplicate another, so I'll press Shift D to duplicate, bring it over, and then you can press S to scale and just scale that down a little bit. And then press the 0 on the numpad and just make sure you can see those coconuts, just like that. And then I'm going to select this coconut and I'll press Shift D to duplicate, bring it down here. Also press the period on the numpad to zoom over to it, and let's just kind of bring this down there. So press G to grab, just kind of bring it down. All right, just put it into place there on the sand, and that's looking pretty good. Let's press Control S again to save. All right, so now let's create some rocks. So let's now create some low poly rocks, and we'll put the rocks around. So I'm going to press Shift A. Let's go here to mesh, and I want to add another icosphere. Now right behind me on the add icosphere settings, you can just click on that little thing there, open it up, and then on the subdivisions, I do want to turn this up higher to like a 5, and then I will close this. And we're going to be using a similar method as we did with the island to create the low poly rocks. So I'm going to click on the sphere here, and I now want to shape it to kind of make it more like a rock. So I'm going to press G to grab, just kind of bring it up here, and I'll press S to scale, and we will scale that down so it's a better size for a rock. So I'm now going to press the tab key, and that is going to take me into the edit mode. And then again, I want to click right up here to turn on the proportional editing. So I now just want to kind of shape it to make it look like a rock. So I'm first going to select a bottom vertice, and I'll press G to grab, and I want to bring that up, but I do want to scroll with my mouse wheel. Scroll with your mouse wheel to make that a bit more flat. Just make that a bit bigger, and then you can just select some points and press G to grab and just kind of move this around. All right, so just grabbing some points here and pressing G to grab and just kind of move that to make a little rock. All right, that's pretty good. So let's press the tab key to go back into the object mode. So I now want to click right here on the modifier properties, and I want to click on add modifier, and let's go down here, and we're going to add the decimate modifier to make it look more low poly. And then I can turn this ratio down, and that's going to make it look more like a low poly rock. So just like that, we turn the ratio down a little bit more. All right, that's pretty good. So let's press G to grab, and we're going to bring this rock down. I'll also press S to scale, and we're going to scale the rock down and just kind of stick it in there into place. Just kind of rotate it. You can just kind of stick it wherever you want. And then I'm going to press the 0 on the numpad to go into the camera's view. All right, now before I duplicate this, I want to just add a material to it, and that way all the other rocks will have the same material. So I'm going to click right over here on the material properties, and then let's click on the new button to create a new material. So this material here, I'm going to call rocks. So just rename it to rocks. And then I'll take the base color and I'm going to make that kind of a darker color. Now I want each rock to be a slightly different color, so we're going to be using the shader editor again to do that. So right here on the layout, I'm actually going to go right over here to the shading tab. That's going to go to the shading workspace, and then I can kind of zoom in here over to the rock. Now I can actually add in a node here to tell each rock to be a randomly different color. So I'm going to press Shift A, and Shift A is going to bring up the add menu right here, and I'm going to go to the search, and I can search for the object info node. Let's click on the object info node, and I'm going to drop it here. And then I can take this random value, and I'm going to put the random into the base color. So this random value is going to generate random colors from black to white. Now I don't want it to be black and white. I just want it to be different shades of gray. So I want to add another node in here to tell it just to be different shades of gray. So I'm going to press Shift A. I'm going to go to the search here, and I'm going to search for a color ramp node. Let's click on the color ramp, and I'm just going to drop it right in here. And so now we have the color ramp right in there. So what I can do now is press Shift D to duplicate, drop another rock here, and press Shift D to duplicate. And you can see that as I duplicate rocks, they're randomly different colors. Now I don't want it to be just black and white. I want it to be more like gray colors for the rocks. So on this black tab right here, I can click on this color here, and I can actually make this a little bit brighter. So I'll just make that a bit brighter, still kind of a darker color, but a little bit brighter. And then I can click right over here on this white tab. So just select that white tab, and I can click on this color right here. And this one I'm going to make kind of a gray color. So something like that. So now you can see that all those rocks are generally gray colors. So I can just actually select some of these rocks and I will delete them. So I'm going to select this rock and press X to delete, and I will delete it. And then I can select this rock and I will press the period on the numpad. That's going to zoom over to the rock, and I don't actually need the shader editor anymore, so I'm going to go back to the layout so that is full screen. All right, and then I will press the period on the numpad to zoom over to the rock. So I'm going to press the tab key, and that's going to go into the edit mode, and then I can just kind of select parts of these rocks and press G to grab, and I want to make this rock look a little bit different because I don't want it to look exactly the same. I do want each rock to be a little bit different, so I'm just going to select some vertices and press G to grab and just kind of make this rock look a little bit different. All right, just like that, and then I can also press R to rotate it on the Z axis and just rotate that around. So now what I can do is I can press G to grab and S to scale, and I just want to bring the rock down. I'll also press R to rotate, and I just want to stick some rocks here and there just around the island. I'll put a rock there. I'm also going to select this one again. Let's press the 0 to go into the camera view, and then I'll press Shift D to duplicate, and I can just bring this over here. I'll press R to rotate, just kind of rotate that over and just kind of bring it down here, and really just keep on duplicating the rocks and placing them wherever you want. I'm also going to select this rock here, and then I will press Shift D to duplicate, and I'll bring this one into the water. I thought it would be cool to have some rocks in the water. I'll press S to scale that rock up and just kind of rotate it over. I can also double tap the R key, and that'll activate the trackball rotation. And then if I want to change the size of the rock or the shape of the rock, I can press tab to go into edit mode, and then I can just select some of these vertices and press G to grab, and I can just kind of play around with the shape of that rock. But then if I press the tab key to go back into the object mode, you can see that it applies those modifiers, and so now it looks like a low poly rock. All right, so I'm just going to stick the rock right there, and then I will press Shift D to duplicate, and I'll press R to rotate, and I can just kind of rotate this rock over here. Just kind of make another rock there, and go into the camera view by pressing 0 on the numpad and just kind of make it look good from the camera's perspective. I'm going to select another rock, and I'll press Shift D to duplicate it and just kind of bring it over here, and let's just stick it right down here, maybe scale it down a little bit like that, and then I can press Shift D again to duplicate, and then press G to grab and just kind of rotate that around. And of course you can tab into edit mode and then just select some vertices and play around with the shape of those rocks. Just kind of move that out like that. Okay, bring that one back a little bit. So maybe this is a longer rock, stick it down there. All right, that is looking pretty cool. And I will select this rock again and press Shift D to duplicate, bring another rock here in the water, and I can also rotate this, so rotate it on the Z axis, just kind of rotate that rock over and stick it down there. All right, so you can just continue to duplicate rocks and put them around. I'm gonna call that good. So I'm now going to select this cloud right here, and I'll press G to grab, and I want to bring this cloud over so I can see it a little bit better. And then I'm going to press Shift D to duplicate, and I'm going to bring this cloud over here, and then I can also rotate it, so I can press R to rotate, and I want to rotate it on the Z axis and just kind of rotate that over to the other side and just kind of maybe scale it up a little bit. And then I can press Shift D to duplicate, and then I can do the same thing kind of like how I did with the rocks. I can tab into edit mode, and I can just select some of these vertices, and I can press G to grab, and then again scroll with your mouse wheel, and you can just give the cloud a randomly different shape just by kind of moving that around. You can also press the period on the numpad just to kind of zoom over to the cloud and just kind of play around with the shape of the cloud and make it look a bit different and a bit more random. And then I can also press Shift D to duplicate the cloud again, and I'll press the 0 on the numpad to go into the camera view, and I can scale this one down, maybe just make a smaller one. And I'm also going to rotate it, so press R to rotate on the Z axis, and I can just kind of rotate it like that. So there we go, we just have a few clouds scattered around the sky. Just press Ctrl S again to save, and then I also want to add a depth of field, and if you add a depth of field, then things that are really far away will be kind of blurred, but then everything else that's kind of in the center here where the camera is looking at, that'll be in focus. So to add the depth of field, I need to select the camera, so you can just click up here to select the camera. And then you can click right over here, and this is going to go to the object data properties, so the camera settings. Now right here you can see there is a depth of field, so I'm just going to click on this check mark here to turn on the depth of field. Now we want some object to focus on, so I want to focus on the chest object. So you can click right here and then you can look for the object, but I don't remember what it's called and we didn't name any of the objects. So what I can do instead is click on this eyedropper right here, and then I can just click on this cube right here, and that is the chest. So now you can see the chest is in focus, but things that are far away are pretty blurred. So if you want to change the amount of blur, you can change this f-stop value. So if you turn the f-stop to a very small value, you can see that lots of things are blurred, and I don't like that. So I'm going to turn the f-stop value up so that the island is in focus, but then kind of way back here where the clouds are, things are a bit blurred. And if you want to make the clouds even more blurred, then you can select the clouds. So just hold down the shift key and shift select all the clouds, and then you can kind of zoom way out here, and you can press G to grab and just bring the clouds way back, so bring them pretty far back, and then go into the camera view, and then press S to scale and scale the clouds up. Just scale the clouds up a bit, and then press G to grab and just kind of move the clouds back up into place. But now because they're farther away, they're even more blurred, and I do think that looks pretty nice. All right, now there is something else that you might have noticed. If I zoom over here to the boat, you can see that there is some water going through the boat. Now, we aren't really able to see it in the camera's perspective, but you might be rendering out some other shots here, or maybe you're rendering a short animation or something, and so you might be able to see the water in the boat. So I'm just going to get rid of that. So what I'm going to do is select the water, just make sure the water is selected, and then I'm going to go right over here to the modifier properties. So we're going to add a modifier to tell it to cut out a face there right where the water is inside the boat. So I'm going to click on add modifier, and we want to go under generate, and I want to add the Boolean modifier. So I'm going to click on Boolean. So the Boolean is basically going to use a different object to cut out the mesh. So what I want to do right here on this object is I want to click on the eyedropper, and then I want to click on the boat, because the boat is where the water is going through. So I'm going to click on the eyedropper, and then I want to click on the boat. So now that we've done that, I also just want to make sure that this is set to difference. And then on this type here, I just want to make sure this is set to object. All right, so now what I need to do is apply the modifier. So I can click on this drop down here and I can click on apply. You can also just select the modifier, and with your mouse hovered over the modifier, you can press Control A, that is the shortcut key. Now you can see that nothing has really changed, but if I press the tab key to go into edit mode and zoom in here, you can see that it has actually cut a face right there where the water is inside the boat. So we can now just delete that face in edit mode. So just make sure you're in edit mode, and I want to press 3 on the top of my keyboard, or click right here to go to the face select. So I can now just select this face right here, and then I'm going to delete it. So I'm going to press the X key, and I want to delete the faces. And then you can see there are some more faces. So I'm just going to select the face and then hold down the shift key and just shift select all those other faces. All right, and then I can press the period on the numpad to zoom into them, and it looks like we have a few more here, so hold down the shift key and just select all of those faces. All right, so those are all the faces, so I'll press X to delete, and I want to delete the faces. All right, and also one here that I missed, so click right there, X to delete, and we can delete the faces. All right, so there we go. So if I tab back into object mode now, that looks good. So there isn't any water going through the boat. If I select the water and press G to grab, you can see this is what it did. So it basically cut out the mesh, and so there's kind of like an indent of the boat. I'm just going to press Control Z though, just to bring the water back there. All right, so we're now going to be creating some blades of grass, and then we'll be putting the grass around the island. So I'm going to just hold down the Z button and go back into solid view to do this. I think it's a little bit easier to do it in the solid view. So I'm going to press Shift A, and I'm going to go to mesh here, and to create the grass blades, the stylized low poly grass blades, I want to add a cube. So let's add a cube. I can press G to grab and then S to scale, and I just want to stick the grass blades kind of over here, just bring them down just like that. And I'll press the period on the numpad to zoom over to it. And then I'm going to press the tab key, and the tab key is going to take me into edit mode. And then I'll press S to scale, and I want to scale this on the Y-axis, and let's make it a bit smaller, and then just place that there. So it's kind of thin. I'm now going to select this face right here, and then I'll press G and Z, and we're going to bring it up. And you can see it's bringing up the rest of the mesh with it, and that's because of the proportional editing. So I'm just going to right click to undo that, and then I want to click right here to turn off the proportional editing. So I can now press G to grab, and I'll hit Z to bring it up on the Z axis, click right there, and then I can press E to extrude, and then S to scale, and then R to rotate, and G to grab. And actually I want to scale that up a bit more so it doesn't get quite that small that quickly. And then I'll press E to extrude again, and then S to scale, and then R to rotate, and G to grab. We're just gonna kind of make a very simple grass blade. Then I'm going to press E to extrude and bring it up one more time, but then I want it to be a point at the end. So I'm going to press S to scale, and then I'm going to type in 0 and enter. So basically it's going to squish it all together into one point. And then I'm going to also click right here to go to the vertex select. Now we still have all those pieces selected there, all those vertices. So I want to merge them together. So to merge them together, you can press the M key, M for merge, and I want to click on by distance. And that way, if you click on by distance, you can see it says removed 3 vertices. So it basically just merged all those vertices together because they were really close to each other. So let's double tap the A key to select everything. And I now want to press Shift D to duplicate, and we can duplicate the grass blade. So I can now press R to rotate. Let's rotate it on the Z axis, and then I can press G to grab, kind of bring it over, and I can press R to rotate and G to grab, bring that into place there. All right, so I'm now going to hold down the Z button, go back into wireframe and let go, and then I'll press A to deselect everything, and I'm going to press B for the box select, and I'm just going to drag a box around those vertices, and then I can press R to rotate and G to grab. We're just going to bring that down a bit, just kind of like that. Maybe even select this vertex and press G to grab. And we're just going to make the grass blade a little bit different. So now what I'm going to do is double tap the A key to select both of them, and I'm going to press Shift D to duplicate, and then R to rotate. We're just going to rotate these around, and we're just going to make them look a little bit different, just kind of making some clumps of grass. So just kind of move that around there. All right, let's press A to deselect everything, and I can press B for the box select. I'm just going to box select these vertices, and then I can press R to rotate and G to grab and just kind of bring them up there, and then press B for the box select, just box select those vertices, and then R to rotate and G to grab. And we're just kind of sticking them right up there. Let's hold down the Z button and go back into the solid view. All right, that's pretty good. And then also if you want to, what you can do is hover your mouse over one of the grass blades and press L, and that is going to select all of the linked vertices. And then I just want to scale this one down a bit. So I'm going to press S to scale, and then Z to bring it on the Z axis and just kind of bring it down, and then press G to grab and just kind of bring it down here. And something that is pretty important is that the origin point, that little dot there, that little orange dot, it's important that that is in the center there, so about the center. So you can double tap the A key to select everything and press G to grab and just kind of stick that there in the center. And also it shouldn't be super far down, so there should be some grass blades going down there just so that they can fully go into the ground when we stick them on the island there. All right, so I'm going to tab to go back into object mode. I want to make 2 more variations of this grass. So I'm going to press Shift D to duplicate. Let's just bring a grass over there. And then I'm going to press tab to go into edit mode. Now everything is still selected. So what I'm going to do is press Shift D to duplicate, and then I will press R to rotate. And I'm also going to kind of rotate it sideways, bring it down like that, maybe scale it down a little bit. And you can adjust these more if you want to. I'm just going to go like that. So I'll go back into object mode, and now we have 2 bits of grass. Now I also want to select this one again, and I want to make 1 more variation. So I'm going to press Shift D to duplicate. Shift D will duplicate it. We're going to bring it over, and then I can press tab to go into edit mode, and I'm just going to hold down the Z button, go into wireframe and let go, and then I can just press A to deselect everything, and I'll press B for the box select, and I'm just going to box select some of these pieces here. Oh, I need to press B for the box select, and then middle click and drag just to deselect that. And then I can press R to rotate and G to grab and just kind of make it a little bit different. All right, maybe actually just rotate this grass blade over a little bit. So it's rotated over there, something like that. And then I can also just delete one of these to make only 3 of them. So I'm just going to hover my mouse over this object and press L, and then I can just delete it by pressing X, and we can delete the vertices. All right, hold down the Z button, go back into solid view, and just tab back into object mode. So we now have 3 different blades of grass. So I now want to create the material for the grass. So I'm going to click right over here on the material properties, and I'm going to click on new here to add a new material, and I can just call this material grass. All right, grass. Now, just like I did with the rocks, I want to make each clump of grass be a randomly different color. So to do that, let's click right over here on the shading tab so we can edit the shading nodes. So then right here we have the principled BSDF. So this is the shader. But what I want to do now is press Shift A right here. Then I'm going to go to the search, and I am going to search for the object info node, just like we did with the rocks. So I'm going to drop this here, and then I also need to press the period on the numpad. That's going to zoom me over to the grass. All right, so now what I want to do is I want to take the random and I want to put that into the base color. And then also I want to put the grass material on these objects as well. So you can just click on the object, and then right over here, click on the drop down, and then you can find it. It's right here, the grass material. So you can do it that way, but what you can also do is you can just scroll over here or right over here, and you can click and drag this material, and you can see now I have it, and I'm going to drop it right here on this material. So now that object has the grass material as well. All right, so we've plugged the random into the base color on the principled shader. So the random value is going to randomly generate colors from black to white. But I don't want it to be black and white. I want it to be kind of some yellowish colors and some greenish colors. So I'm going to press Shift A. Let's go to the search here, and I'm going to search for a color ramp node, and let's just drop the color ramp node right here. So the random is going to go into the factor, and then the color will go into the base color. So on the black tab right here, I'm going to click on this color, and I'm going to make it brighter, and then I'm going to make it kind of a yellowish greenish, so something like that, and maybe I'll make it a little bit darker. So that is the first one. Now I'm going to click on the white tabs, and I'm going to click on the color here, and this one is going to be kind of a darker green, so make it a green color and a bit darker. And there we go. So now you can see that each clump of grass has a little bit of a different color. All right, so now what I want to do is I want to put these grass blades into a collection. So they're going to be in their own collection. So if you go back to the layout here, you can see right here, this is the outliner, and there are different collections. And this is basically just a way to organize all the objects in your scene. So if you click on this little arrow here, it's going to open up this tab, and here are all the different objects, and also there's the camera, and there's all the different objects in your 3D scene. So right now they are all in this default collection, but what I want to do is make a new collection and put all of these in their own collection. So I'm going to select the grass blade and then hold down the Shift key and select the other grass clumps. All right, so I now want to move them into their own collection. So I'm going to press the M key. So the M key is the shortcut key to move, and that is in the object mode. If you are in the edit mode by pressing tab, the M key is the merge, but if you press M in the object mode, that is going to bring up the move. And I want to click on new collection. So then on the name here, I want to just rename this to grass, okay? And then we can click on OK. So now you can see that there is this collection, and this has all the other objects, but then we have this correct collection, and this collection just has the grass objects. So I'm now going to press the 0 on the numpad, and that is going to bring me back into the camera view. And then I just want to select the island. Now we could just manually place the grass around, but I want to use Blender's geometry nodes to place the grass randomly around. So to use the geometry nodes, I want to split the window. So I'm going to click right here when the crosshair appears, and then I can click and drag over, and that is going to split the window. So we now have two different windows. Now I want to change this window to a different editor type. So I'm going to click right here, and then I can go right down here, and I want to change it to the geometry node editor. So click on geometry node editor. All right, and then I can also click right here and drag and close this panel right there. All right, so I now want to add geometry nodes on this object right here on the island object. I'm also going to hold down the Z button and go up into the rendered view. So I want to select the island, and then I want to click on new here. When you click on new, now it adds the geometry nodes. So we're going to use the geometry nodes to place the grass on the object. So I'm going to press Shift A, and I'm going to go to the search here, and I'm going to search for instance. And I want to go right down here, and I want to click on instance on points. So we're going to drop this node right in here. And then what I also want to do is press Shift A, and I'm going to go to the search here, and I'm going to start to type in distribute, and I want to add the distribute points on faces, and I'm going to drop that right here. Now we can't see the island right now, and that is because we need to plug the original geometry back into the group output. So we want to take the original geometry and add it up after these nodes. So what I'm going to do is press Shift A. I'm going to go to the search here, and I'm going to search for the join geometry node. So let's click on the join geometry, and I want to just stick it right down here. So we want the distribute points on faces and the instance on points to both be going through there and going into the geometry. But then I want to take this geometry and I want to plug it up to the geometry on the join geometry. So now we are adding the island geometry back in there. All right, so now what I want to do is I want to press Shift A, and I'm going to go to the search here, and I'm going to search for collection, and I want to add the collection info node because we need to tell these nodes what we actually want to be distributed onto the island object. So now in the collection info, I can click right here and we can click on the grass collection. So we're going to select the grass collection. And now right here on the instance on points, I want to plug the geometry from the collection info up to the instance. And there we go. So now you can see that it's making the grass all around. Now there is a problem here, and that is that the grass is over here and it's not actually on the island. So this is really easy to fix. I want to, right here on the collection info, I want to click on the separate children. I also want to click on the reset children, and then I also want to check mark this pick instance. All right, so there we go. Now you can see it is on the island, but it's way too big. So right here we can actually change the scale. So I can actually click and then drag down, and then I can drag back and forth, and that's going to change all the values at the same time. And then as I'm dragging, I can hold down the Shift key and play around with the scale value. So this scale value is basically just going to change the scale of the grass. Now you can just change the scale right here, but I want each blade of grass to have a random scale. So to do this, I'm going to press Shift A, and I'm going to go to the search here, and I'm going to search for a random value node. So let's click on the random value, and I'm going to drop it down here. And then I want to take this value and I want to put it up into the scale. So now right here on the random value node, we have two values. We have the minimum scale and we have the maximum scale. And then the random value is going to make it so that each blade of grass is randomly generated between those two scales. So I'm going to make the minimum pretty small to like a 0.002. So just change that to like a 0.002. And then on the max, I want to turn that way down as well so that it's much smaller. And I want to change this to like a 0.01. So a 0.01. And that is a little bit small. So maybe just like a 0.013. All right. So now you can see that they're a random scale. So these are smaller and then these are bigger. So it's just randomly generating a random scale. So instead of using the scale values, it's randomly giving each clump of grass a different scale. Now I also want to have a random rotation just to make it look a bit better. So what I can do is click on the random value and I can press Shift D to duplicate it, and let's just drop it right down here. And then what I want to do is I want to take this value and I want to plug it into the rotation. So we could just use these rotation values right here, and you can see that if you rotate the Z one, it's going to rotate that around, but I want it to be random. So let's take the value and I want to put that into the rotation. Now I mostly just want the grass to be rotating around on the Z axis. So instead of having this random value set to float, I'm going to click on this and I'm instead going to change it to vector. And then I'm going to take the value and I need to plug that back up to the rotation. So now I want to take all of these values here on the max and I want to turn these all to 0. So I can click and then I can hold my mouse down and drag down and let go. And that way we can change all the values at the same time. And I'm going to change them to 0 and then enter. So now they're just on the default and all the grass is pointing up. But I now want to rotate the grass around on the Z axis. So this bottom one here, this is the Z axis. So I can just bring this up to a really big number. So bring this maximum to a really big number. And now you can see that each blade of grass is kind of randomly rotated around. And then also if you want each blade of grass to be slightly one way or another way, then you can change the Y rotation and the X rotation. So what I can do is just turn these up a little bit. So I'm going to turn them up just to like a 0.3. So I'll turn this one up to a 0.3, and also this value right here, I will turn this up just to like a 0.3. And now the grass is mostly pointed up, but it's just randomly rotating to the side just a little, but then it's rotating around in a circle a lot. All right, so that's really cool. And so now we have some grass around our island. Now there is one more really cool thing that I want to do. I want to actually tell the grass where it's going to be on the island. So to do that, we are going to actually be painting on the island where we want the grass to be. So I'm going to select the island right here, and then I'm going to click on object mode, and I'm instead going to go right here, and I'm going to change this to weight paint. So weight paint is going to allow us to paint where we want the grass to be, and then the grass will only show up in that area. So what I can do is click and drag and start to paint, and you can see that it's going to paint these colors. So what this is going to do is going to tell it that wherever the values are red, there's going to be lots of grass, but then wherever it is blue, there's going to be no grass at all. And then in between, as it slowly gets more to a red color, there's going to be more and more grass. Now you can see that it's not really doing anything. I'm painting here, but it's not really doing anything, and that's because I haven't set it up yet. So what I want to do is I want to click on the distribute points on faces, and I want to click on random, and I'm instead going to change it to the Poisson disk. So just change it to Poisson disk, and then what I want to do is I want to take this density factor, and I want to take a wire, pull a wire out there, and I'm going to stick it right up here into the group input. And when you do that, now you can click right over here on the modifier properties, and I can kind of scroll down here, and if I scroll way down, you can see there is the displacement on this object, and then there's also the decimate. I can just make this a bit smaller, but then there's also the geometry nodes. So when you add geometry nodes onto objects, it adds it as a modifier. So when I plug this up, this new value appeared. If I just press Ctrl Z to undo that, let me just press Ctrl Z, you can see that value isn't there, but when I take the density factor and plug a wire up to this new one right here, it adds this density factor right here. So I could play around with this density factor by dragging it, and I could turn it all the way down to 0, and you can see there's no grass, or I could turn it up to 1, but instead of just having a value between 1 and 0, I want to use the weight paint. So I am going to click on this button right here, and this is the input attribute toggle. So I'm going to click on that, and now instead of using a number value, we can actually use the data here from the weight paint. So I'm going to click on this right here, and then I want to go to the point group float. So I'm going to click on the point one right there, and now when I start to paint, you can see where I'm painting, the grass is appearing. And then also, to make there be a lot more grass, right here on the distribute points on faces, I can turn the density max up to make a lot more grass. So now this is really cool. Wherever I paint, there is going to be grass. So I can just paint more, and you can see it doesn't really show up until it gets more to the red, because where it's blue, there's not going to be any, but then as it gets more and more to a red color, there's going to be more and more grass. And then you can also go into the camera view by pressing 0 on the numpad to go into the camera, and you can just kind of paint and just paint wherever you want there to be grass. Now, if you accidentally painted somewhere where there's too much grass, what you can do is you can actually click right up here, and this is going to go to the active tool and workspace settings, and this is going to give you some different settings. So right here, you actually have some different brushes. So right now it's set to draw, but if I want to get rid of the values, I can click right here on this little icon, and I can instead change it to subtract. So if I change it to subtract, now I can paint, and you can see it's going to remove color instead of adding color. And I can also change like the strength value right here if I want to make it more subtle. All right, so I can get rid of some spots if I added too much. And then if I click here, I can change it to add, and add is going to add more color. So now I can just kind of click around, just click and tap, just add more grass here and there. So this is really cool. You can just kind of paint wherever you want the grass to be. So I want to have some grass down here by the water, and some grass also right back over here kind of at the end of the island. And I also like the grass being around the trees. That just seems kind of cool. I like that stylized look. All right, so that is good. So I like how that is. So I'm now done with the painting. So I can click right here on weight paint, and I can change it back to the object mode. And when I went back into object mode, you can see the grass kind of changed a little bit, whereas I would go back into weight paint, you can see the grass moves a little bit, and that is because we have these other modifiers right here. So you can see that it changes a little bit. I can go right here to object mode, and you can see now that grass there is gone. That's because of these other modifiers right here, but when we are in the weight paint, you're not actually able to see these modifiers. So to fix this, we can just apply the modifiers. So let's click back on object mode, and then let's click on this displacement here, click on the drop down, and you can click on apply, and that'll apply it. And then on the decimate, you can click right here and click on apply to apply it. If you want to, you don't have to apply it if you don't want to, but you can apply those modifiers. So I'll press Ctrl S again to save. So now if I click back on object mode and go back right here to the weight paint, now I can start to paint again, and I can just kind of fix up any areas. Yeah, because those modifiers did kind of edit how the mesh was looking. So I can just kind of go back along here and just kind of paint some areas. All right, so I'm just going to add a little bit more grass here and there. All right, so that is good for me. So I'm going to click right here on the weight paint, and I'm going to go back to the object mode, and I'll press Control S again to save. All right, so I now don't need to use the geometry nodes editor anymore, so I can just click right here when that crosshair appears in the corner, click and hold my mouse down, drag over, and then let go to close that. All right, so we are ready to render the final image. So just press Control S again to save, and then to render the image, you can click on render and click on render image, or the shortcut key is F12. So we'll just wait for that to render, and because it's using Blender Eevee, it should render pretty fast. It rendered really quick on my computer. So there it is. There is the final image. Now to save this image to your computer, you can click right up here on image, and then you can click on save as. And I'm just going to save this as island.png, and you can just choose the file format. I'm just going to use a PNG, or you could also use a JPEG, and then click on Save As Image. So I'll press Control S again to save, and this is going to wrap it up for the tutorial series on creating the low poly island. So thank you so much for following along with the tutorial. I hope you learned a lot from the tutorial, and I hope you enjoyed it as well. And again, if you'd like to help support me and my YouTube channel, I am trying to create Blender tutorials and Blender content for a living. So if you'd like to help support me and my channel, then checking out my Gumroad store and Patreon page are really great ways to support the channel. And on my Gumroad store and Patreon page, you can get the 3D models and assets. You can also get project files and the tutorial files for this one here, as well as my other tutorial files and procedural materials and other Blender content. And if you'd like to help support the channel monthly here on YouTube, you can also check out the YouTube memberships. So if you click down on that join button next to the subscribe button, if you join my memberships, then you'll be helping to support the channel each month, and you'll get some cool perks here on YouTube. But again, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial series, and I hope to see you in a future tutorial.